Okay, hello and welcome everybody to this webinar on the Outcomes Star, hosted by Inclusive NZ. So I'm in the Inclusive NZ offices in Wellington, and very grateful for them sort of setting this up and hosting it, and also managing the software and technical side of things so effortlessly. As there's quite a few people online and you can't see each other, we're not going to, I won't get you to introduce yourself, also just because of time. So I'm going to launch in, and then if there are questions, see if there are questions at the end. I think that's the easiest way to handle it. I quite like taking questions up front, but I think that's going to be not going to work with this format that well. Okay. So what I'm going to do is introduce myself, triangle, the origins of the star, talk about what it is, how it works, and I can touch briefly on the sort of development process for it, and also the evidence base, but I won't go into those much unless people are interested, and also sort of say what we're doing with it at the moment, and then take questions. My understanding is we have an hour, yeah, including questions. I'll talk fairly briskly through, because I know it can take a while, and I want to leave plenty of time for questions. But also, if you can and want to interrupt me as I'm talking, to ask for points of clarification or questions, I'm very open to that. So in terms of the origin of the Outcome Star, so my name's Sara Burns. I've worked from London. I work in the UK, and originally, my sort of background is research and evaluation, going back to the sort of late 80s. And I've ended up specialising in the whole area of outcomes and how you capture change and capture outcomes, mainly because it was sort of mooted in the UK very early on in the 1990s in the alcohol misuse field where I happened to be working. And I did quite a lot of work in that sector, looking at not just why outcomes funding per se was an unhelpful way forward and a very blunt instrument, but why taking an outcomes approach and being able to understand and measure the outcomes for clients was actually a very helpful thing for organisations at lots of levels. So I did loads of work through the 90s. I think I have worked specialising in this area for longer than anyone, certainly in the UK. And I've yet to find someone else anywhere else in the world. But I didn't come up with the Outcome Star on my own during that work. That came out of a collaboration with a large homelessness organisation in London called St Mungo's in 2002-03, which was me and two colleagues, Joy McKeith and Kate Graham. We worked together responding to a brief from that organisation, wanting a tool to capture outcomes for clients, something that would travel with their clients and that was centred on them. And that work came up with the original prototype of the star. And that work was funded by a foundation called the London Housing Foundation, which stipulated it needed to be freely shared. So what happened over a number of years after that is that a lot of organisations in the homelessness sector in London, so quite specific at the time, wanted to look at how they could measure their outcomes, and a lot of them picked up on the star and said, actually, we want to use the star. So we learned a lot. We worked with them, we helped them implement the star. We learned about how it could be a key working tool as well as a data capture tool, and further developed it quite a lot over sort of 2003 to 6, and then published it online in 2006. And since then, it's been picked up by different sectors. So a lot of our approach has been very responsive, mainly because it's taken off at a rate where we could sort of just about keep up with interest. And so we've responded from people in different sectors who've said, actually, wouldn't it be a great idea if there was a tool for this? And but also we've had various what we've termed decision nodes along the way. And one of those key ones was, do we create lots of different sort of organisation-specific versions of the star? Or actually what we realised was having a tool in a sector that could be used collaboratively by lots of different organisations. That was developed and used by lots of different organisations was actually a much more helpful thing. It gave a sort of shared language in a sector, a shared understanding of outcomes. It saved everybody needing to do that work for themselves and sort of reinvent the wheel specifically. So that's what we've been doing. We now have over 25 different versions of the Outcome Star. It's not a priority for us to create more, but I don't appear to be able to stop. And that's one of the areas that I lead on. And we're also learning a huge amount about what it takes for organisations to use it well. And used well, it's a tool with two main purposes. It's a key working tool, a support planning tool. It's something to engage service users in their own process, in their own lives. And also it can generate meaningful outcomes information, which I understand is increasingly required in New Zealand. There's increasing pressure on people to be able to evidence the outcomes of their work. And also what we've learned over the years, that in doing those things, it can also help to do a sort of workers' skills, support workers' skills, and ensure that people are working in a way that's holistic and strengths-based and very much listening to clients and engaging with them. So here's a picture of one. This is the Mental Health Recovery Star, which is one of the earlier ones. So this is the 4th edition, which we're just about to publish. And in essence, the outcome stars are really straightforward, which is that there are a number of scales, which are either 1 to 10 scales or 1 to 5. This one's 1 to 10, arranged in a radial shape. And we've used the design of a star, which appears to work very effectively. It has sort of positive associations for people. It's attractive. They're all different colours. And the areas of the star is part of what's derived during the collaborative process of development. We work with organisations in the sector concerned, and part of it is, well, what are the areas in which you work with people to help change their lives so that you can achieve the end outcome, whatever that might be. And if I ask the people here, you know, what areas do you work with people in? If you worked in mental health, for example, you'd probably come up with quite a similar list to this. But how they're configured is part of the development process, and sort of varies quite a lot where the emphasis is placed. So you've got a number of areas. This one's 10 areas. Some of them are 7, 8, 9. It depends. Key thing is that rather than being an open scale or a basic severity scale or quality of life satisfaction scale, it's based on an understanding of the process people go through when they change, and the way that you as a service can help people change. So it's about their engagement with the issue. It's about their skills, behaviours, attitudes, beliefs, as things start to shift from being very stuck, where somebody might have multiple things going wrong or high risks, but they really don't want to engage with support, or they're not able to engage with support for whatever reason, which could be being in the midst of trauma. It could be having very bad experiences in the past of people promising to help and it not working out. Whatever reason, it's stuck. And then moving through to accepting help, which is a really key change point, the point at which change becomes possible, because you're saying, you know, it's okay, this is bad, how, you know, I need help to change it. The locus of control and energy there is very much the worker supporting someone. And then moving into, there's a really sort of key change point, moving into the believing and trying, where somebody has a sort of internal belief that says, okay, I can see a different future. I want to move towards it. But, you know, not knowing how to do that, having lots of skill, ways of being maybe that hold them back. So really trying to change things, and maybe things going wrong a lot, so needing a lot of support, and then moving into gradually getting a sense of what works for them, and then moving into self-reliance, which is where they don't need a service. So there may be loads more that could improve for them, but they have the tools and the support, maybe from family or friends or community-based support, to help make that a reality as they go along. And how the star, oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Let's see what happens. So that understanding of change, that change process, there are different ones for different stars, but that's a sort of core one that underpins a number of versions. And what that informs is a sort of brief description of each of the scales, which is represented visually. You can see it on screen as a ladder, and it's very much in eye language, and it's all derived, again, bottom up in the development process. It's very tested, very honed. There are lots of iterations, lots of testing. And then also there'll be detailed scales for each of those. So you get the sort of user guides with scales, or it's all online, where you get actually all of the scales will be in there, described for each of the different stars. And there's a web application, which I'll talk about a bit later, and there all of these scales are integral to the web application, so the whole thing can be used without paper, basically, which works better for some clients, particularly young people, but an increasing number of people are much more used to and comfortable with, touching something on a screen or bringing something up on a screen than they are with the paper. So for all of these reasons, this fact of this underlying journey of change and the scales and the detail of it, it's really essential that people are trained in order to use the star and familiar with it. And also it's important because the star is designed to be used collaboratively, which is not people's usual way of working necessarily in terms of support planning. Or sometimes it is, in which case they take to the star very easily, but for other people it isn't. So it's not a worker-only assessment, and it's not a user self-completion tool. It is service user-led and focused, but the intention is that both the worker and the service user are feeding into that discussion and using the scale descriptors. So the idea of the journey of change and its the way it's presented accessibly and using the language it does is that it actually part of the empowering process for the client is understanding that they are a person on a journey, and that's why things look as they do. They can see the next steps that can help them to focus on what's needed to get there. It helps them put the sort of up and down day-to-day trials of their life in a bigger context and to see why things are happening. So that's part of it. The whole aspect of collaborative nature of it is completely fundamental to it. So not only the star itself conceived collaboratively, is each version developed collaboratively, but also it's designed to be used collaboratively between a client and a worker. And also for some people particularly, there may be other people involved in that collaborative process, so to the family or wider community, particularly in the area of intellectual disability or children, but maybe also for other people too, as appropriate. So the idea is you're talking about each of the areas, using the journey of change, using the scales, and then agreeing and placing somebody on those scales. And in the training, it also covers, well, what happens if you disagree? How do you use that as a springboard for discussion? Or what do you do if you really can't come to any agreement? Which is likely if somebody is stuck, because they will probably not have the perspective on the whole journey to be able to meaningfully place themselves on one of the scales. So the idea is that you do that, and whether it might be the worker holding the pen or the client holding the pen, and then you can join up the dots and you get a picture, and the picture is, this is how life is at the moment. And then you can use that together to say, okay, what's going well, what's not going so well, where are the priorities? And again, with training, it focuses in on how you use the completed star to help choose the priority areas to work on, and also how the journey of change can, and where somebody is on that 1 to 10 scale or 1 to 5 scale, can help inform how you work with them. So that might be that, okay, well, somebody is accepting help, but very much that all that energy is from the worker. If the worker stops driving it, they're likely to slip back again. So then you would expect to sort of not just refer somebody somewhere, but maybe pick them up and take them there and introduce them to someone, because they're not driving that for themselves. So you look at it together and use it as a basis for a support plan. And then that would be, you'd then come back to it maybe 3 months later, 6 weeks later, whatever it is, depending on the length of service. Do it again, draw another shape, review the support plan. So basically organisations integrate using it at whatever point they're support planning with people. So it's not often used as the initial thing you do with somebody when you first meet them. And usually the frequency of it is integrated with whenever you sort of step back holistically and look across the whole of somebody's life, rather than just working on the particular details of the plan. So none of that is stipulated by a triangle or a star. How it's integrated in the frequency with organisations, and there's guidance on it and advice. But the star, so it's important also to know when the star works, when it doesn't work. So it works really well for when there's a one-to-one ongoing relationship that's usually at least 6 weeks long or 3 months long, and where you're looking across different aspects of somebody's life. If there's 1 or 2 areas on the star that people don't focus on, then that's okay. But if you're just working, for example, on somebody's living skills or their financial capability, then it wouldn't be the right tool. And nor is it the right tool if it's very brief crisis type interventions, or advice giving, or referring people on, or for drop-in things, or for where it's only group work and there's no one-to-one time with someone. So it's a specific tool for a specific type of work with people. And in that sense, where it works is in that interaction between a worker and a client. And it's very much, I don't know how it is in New Zealand, but in the UK, you used to have a sort of old-fashioned paradigm of worker as expert, professional as expert, telling people what to do. And that went out of fashion. And then there was much more sort of client-focused priority, a sort of client-led. And that can also sort of disarm workers slightly, because then the client has all the power, and so what's their role should they really question the life choices being made by their clients. So what the star does, it makes it explicit that both of those agendas are in the room, and what the roles of both of those people are. So it fits very well with coaching ways of working, motivational interviewing, with lots of different approaches where you're having a very genuine interaction between a worker and a client, and giving rise to, that it's within that interaction that the star sits. And it can provide a framework for that conversation. So one of the things that somebody was saying to me when I was in Perth is, our workers get really sort of, they can overcomplicate it. And they kept saying to them, it's a conversation. This is about a conversation. It's about a conversation with a client. And it's a conversation that needs to happen anyway, that does happen anyway, to find out how life is, who they are, how they are, where they're at, what they need, how they're getting on. So that's the main thing about it as a key working tool. Are there any, it's obviously this is quite a brief overview, but are there any questions that people wanted to ask. I was going to move into looking at it as a data tool and the outcomes data it generates, unless there's any questions.
Might be worth mentioning not everybody's got their microphone working, so that there's a text option that they can use. So one of the tools that Zoom has is on the chat function.
Okay. If you wanted to ask a question, you can either enable your microphone or type a question in, and I'll see it magically on the screen. Otherwise, I'll just carry on. So data-wise, obviously you can use the information at an individual level, which is what I was talking about in terms of a support plan. But you can also use it across, you can aggregate it. You can aggregate the data across a particular worker's caseload or a particular group of people across a whole service. You can look at across different services within a large organisation. In all of these cases, what we say is that the STAR data, it doesn't give you final answers, but it helps you ask better and better questions. So it doesn't attribute change and...
Hello.
Now they've all popped back on again. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen. Hello, sorry about that. We went to unstable connection and then incredibly unstable connection, and you all disappeared. Okay, so what the data looks like when you aggregate it is the basic data. There's lots of different ways to play around with it, but the basic data would be, for example, you could average, this is just a straight mean across all of the people, for example, in a service. These are the domains for the Family Star. And you can average those and look at start points and then review points or end points and the amount of change. This is a very blunt instrument, and the mean will flatten the data. So if you've got people who've slipped back and gone forward, it'll give quite a flat average. So there's lots of ways you can play around with it to change that. But it does give you information about, well, where's going really well. So you can see that, okay, in terms of helping parents, support their child's learning and setting boundaries, for example, there seems to be a lot of change happening there from quite a low start point. So that seems to be going well. You might want to drill into, okay, in terms of helping them meet their children's emotional needs, that's not working so well, so what's going on there? And also alongside that, the other data you get is on the percentages of people in that same cohort who've made progress, stayed the same, or slipped back. And those two bits of information together give a lot of information about what's going well at a service level or for a particular caseworker. Or also you can use it to drill down between different ages of people, ethnicities, and different starting needs between men and women. So you can really investigate quite a lot. You can also, this is the data that's generated by the STAR Online web application, but it can be generated by other systems as well. And also this data can be downloaded and manipulated more to say, look at, okay, well, when people come in, how many are in the stuck phase, how many are in the accepting help phase, etc. And of those, how many make progress. So there's quite a lot of ways you can investigate the data. And however you present it, it's really important to present it back, referencing the journey of change so that people know what it means, know what a 5 means. And then you can also present the data at a service level visually on the STAR as well. And so this data can be used to ask all sorts of things and analyze all sorts of things, what's going well, the effectiveness of a service, and also areas that aren't going so well that you might need to hone in on, particular projects, particular members of staff, where things don't seem to be going well and there may need to be some sort of, look at what's going on, why is that not going well, and also about whether people are, you're targeting the right people, if not, why not, and looking at those. So there's lots of different questions that you can ask on the basis of the data. And here's an example, for example, from St Mungo's, that's who we worked with originally on the original STAR prototype. And we found, that one of the things is like headlines. So 73% of clients benefit from the service. Appear to make, so that's 11% staying stable, 62% progressing. So that's the sort of headline you might put in a sort of annual report and report to the board, and used to feel quite reassured as a sort of basic thing. It's a very blunt bit of data. But then you can drill down. So we did this research with St Mungo's a while ago, and because they had lots of data. One of them, for example, was in one service, there seemed to be an incredibly positive progress made for Portuguese clients, which were a sort of significant minority group in this one hostel, because this research was done in 4 hostels. And but actually, when we drilled down, we found, well, actually, there was a Portuguese worker working with that cohort, and that was something they'd done experimentally. Would it work if there was somebody from the same culture? And maybe because it was the same language and culture, or maybe just because this particular Portuguese worker was extremely good, that cohort seemed to be making demonstrably significantly better progress than any other. We also found that in the mixed hostels that women didn't make progress. That they either tended to be at the stuck end or the already self-reliant in most areas, but just needed housing. And in both cases, they were not. Their needs weren't being met. It wasn't working well. And also an interesting finding when you look at the data over time is it found that in 2 of the hostels, people would improve overall on average up to about a year. And then if they hadn't been housed after a year, they started to go back down again. And that was quite an interesting thing, because it was also really clear that the hostels where that happened is the hostels where there were most chaotic people and where there weren't activity-based things. They didn't have like work and learning type activities in the hostel or easily accessible from them. So people started to sort of lose hope quite quickly. So they were all, it's sort of interesting learning management information to be used internally, as well as stuff that can be reported to funders and meeting those needs. Can also use it to compare services. Again, this is really blunt data because it's an overall average across all the areas in a STAR for different services. But again, it can indicate sort of starting points for different services, where progress is and isn't being made a lot, and help, again, ask sort of questions on that basis. And you can see that sort of visually on the STAR as well. So you could present anything visually on the STAR, whether it's one individual or whether it's a service or a caseload. And then, so yeah, that's about the data. Going into, this is a list of all of the STARs. So we've got a lot. We don't seem to be able to stop developing them, mainly because people come and say, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was one for young people with cancer? I think, well, yeah, that would work. Explore it with them and think, oh, yes. So there are lots of different versions. There are some challenges in that and also some benefits in that, because if an organisation has a lot of, or even several different client groups, then you can use 2 or 3 different versions of the STAR, and it's the sort of same approach, same type of data. Often they're on the same underlying journey of change, so you can also draw inferences from the data across different STARs, even though you can't collate between 2 different STARs. So there are quite a lot of benefits, and we do quite a lot, certainly in the UK, of helping people choose which is the right one for them to use. And Kirsty of Butterfly Consulting and Training here also does that in terms of talking organisations through whether there's a version that would work for them, what the right version might be. Increasingly, they've been picked up internationally and translated. There does seem to be quite a broad cultural appropriateness to them, though we're always interested in that being tested and hearing how it works in different situations, and certainly very interested in it being tested here in New Zealand. The UK is very multicultural, so often we're developing them in a multicultural context. But each time they get picked up internationally, one of the questions is, you know, does a straight translation work, or does there need to be change? And I mean, I was in Singapore on the way to Australia on the way to here, and they're talking about using it as it is to test it out and then see if anything change. So there's quite a few. I'm going to yeah, and there's also quite a sort of evidence base for the stars, increasingly, both in terms of looking at it as a key working tool and sort of face validity and how well it works there, but also in terms of the psychometric properties of the star. There's been several studies. We have on the website, if you went on the Outcome Star website, outcomestar.org.uk, it's in there in the section about the star. There's a section on research and validity, and there's a particular briefing paper called Unpacking the Evidence, which summarizes those. But there's a lot of evidence there, and it's all on the web. And we currently now have a researcher working internally in Triangle, and we're you know, it's an area of priority for us is to increase the evidence base as well and test out more stars. So it's a lot of the different benefits that are these are just summarizing some of the benefits for service users and also for services and workers. I'm not going to sort of read through all of these, but it's there's a lot of things that people feed back to us in terms of how it works. I mean, in terms of the sort of benefits for people using it, generally we find it gets picked up with enthusiasm where people try it with clients and have a good experience of that, and actually it really helps in terms of structuring that conversation or drawing things out. Some people say, oh, we've been working with this family for 2 years, and suddenly we didn't know, learn things we didn't know, those sorts of things. So that's where people get the immediate benefit, and that's what people like, and that's why it's been taken up. In terms of the data benefits, it takes longer to realise those because there needs to be work on getting the data, getting it used consistently, getting data that you can really trust to be reliable. But that's also, that's also a big need for people, and this is a way of ticking that box, but not moving away from what's meaningful to clients and workers in the way that you work. So it's not an add-on to all. The fact that one of the sort of core values of it is that it's integrated into what you do anyway. It's part of how you work with people. So it's not an additional data capture evaluation tool to get in the way, basically. This is the homepage for the web application. So staronline.org.uk. Because this is obviously a limited time thing, I won't demonstrate it, but it's very easy to have a look at it yourself. There's that big orange button you can see which says 30-day free trial. It's a good way to look at different versions of the star and also to have a look at what the reports generate. So you can play around with it. It's pretty intuitive. It's well designed. There's a really key emphasis on the sort of user experience and accessibility sort of built in throughout the stars, in terms of the look of the star, the language in all the scales, and also the star online. So even people who are quite IT phobic or seem to like this and find their way about it. So you should be able to just click on there, you add in your email address or something, get access to it, and find your way around pretty easily. So I'd recommend that if you want to find out more after this. So just a couple more slides and then I'm going to stop. So I'm going to stop in about 3 minutes. So basically, originally the Star was published online on the web sort of about nearly 10 years ago now. What we've learned over the years is that in order to be used well, people do need to be trained. So we move from saying, you know, we recommend training to we highly recommend training to really, really, really training's ever such a good idea, to now making it as a mandatory aspect of using the tool. And in order to do that, it's become a licensed product. So you need a license to use it. And there are different types of license. There's the Star Online, which is then also obviously can work, especially for small organizations who need a computer system anyway, a client management system. It can work well. It's not a full client management system, but it gives very sort of core information and obviously the outcomes information. So that's one type of license, the Star Online. And then, but there's another sort, which is if you don't want to use the Star Online, you just want to use it on paper and just put the data in your own system. Both of them are fairly low cost, but also we've had in New Zealand, there's a period of time for piloting it where we're providing a license free of charge and then a sort of limited charge for a couple of years. So, and we're quite interested in hearing back from people in terms of the level of that. So I can go into what it costs and get feedback on that. Anyway, so yes, that's been the sort of key emphasis. And also a key emphasis really for us now is working with organizations to implement the Star and looking at what that takes. So how you build it into the supervision policy, how you build it into team meetings, how you use it in case conferencing. We're also supporting organizations to look at all of the aspects they have to take into account in terms of workers' skills, IT, getting sort of buy-in at different levels of the organization, what it takes to integrate it, because it touches all those different aspects of an organization, and also being able to test with different staff how it's being used. So that's a lot of what our work is. I mean, as we go through, I'm increasingly appreciative of the social enterprise model that we have in terms of sustainability, where although the decisions we make are very much geared on, well, what's going to be really helpful, what's going to help people use this well, what's going to be helpful across a sector. Also, the fact that it is a licensed product and obviously charged for services such as training and the Star Online means that we're sustainable. So I don't know, again, how it happens in New Zealand, but in the UK, you sometimes get people funded for 3 years to create tools. And then at the end of that time, there's no one to support it and it just dies a death. But this way we know we're there. So we're constantly reviewing them, learning alongside our clients and improving the tools, improving how we make them available.